Welcome to the Girls Marketing Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things marketing and the perfect backing track to your workday. Every week, we get up close and personal with marketers revolutionising the industry so you can learn from the best in the game. From the latest marketing trends to building a successful marketing career, no topic is off limits. At Girls in Marketing, we champion progress, inspire change, and encourage women to take the marketing world by storm. Check out our website and membership to learn more and get involved, as we'd love to welcome you to our inner circle. Right, let's dive into another episode together. Welcome back to another episode of the Girls Marketing Podcast. Today we're taking it back to basics and talking all about career progression in marketing. How do you make that next step to your next promotion? How do you understand your career progression potential? This is a topic today's guest knows so much about. Anna Jones is a creative marketing strategist and founder of Your AJency. She champions female founders globally to get them the visibility they deserve through results-driven strategic marketing and storytelling. She's the ultimate cheerleader for female founders, and today we're going to chat about how she's grown a successful career in marketing. So hello, Anna. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm really excited.
I would absolutely love to understand how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So it's not a straightforward route, I'd say, for marketing. So I'm actually a retailer. I started my career after university. I was at Leeds and I did German and business or management studies and majored in marketing. So I always had that marketing, but I did the milk round thing, applied to all these big marketing roles, Mars, all the big ones. Got a lot of rejection actually. But I ended up going on the commercial grad scheme at M&S. It was kind of the best thing that ever happened to me. Partly I met my husband there ultimately, but also just I found that retail now has given me so many transferable skills. Also, I think to be in retail, you have to be quite nitty gritty. And I ended up, I was really ambitious. I wanted to be sort of director level, retail director level. So I knew my route was to go into the flagship. So I started off at the flagship at M&S, running menswear there. And it was all about building a personal brand there really, because I was still using my marketing, even though I wasn't per se in marketing. I had to, because I was in a flagship, I had a really unique client base there. And so I had to convince head office and build really close relationship with the buying and merchandising team so that we could get our own range that was going to not just beat or hit our plan, but smash it. So there was a lot of also work to the reputation of that particular floor had been slightly damaged before I got there. So it was all about building that relationship. So I went there, and then post that, had a brilliant time there. I got my dream job, which was to work initially, what I thought was my dream job anyway, to work at Topshop. So I went into area management for them, and then I ended up running the flagship of Topshop in London, which, as a little girl, I used to love going to that store. So it was oh my gosh, I'm behind the scenes and everything.
Do you have that burning desire to create a website for a new idea, but don't have any coding experience? Don't worry, I've got you. Hostinger is a sponsor of today's episode, and they have created an AI website builder tool, allowing anyone who wants to take their idea online to do so with zero coding skills. Just write 3 sentences to sum up what you're looking for, and Hostinger does the rest. The AI even offers personalized suggestions on layout, design, and content. Bring your new idea to life by heading to hostinger.com/girlsinmarketing and use the exclusive code girlsinmarketing for 10% off your plan. What's stopping you?
So I did all that, and then this is where it kind of took a bit of a turn. So I was in my dream job, recently got married, and I was and then my husband got asked to move to India. So we hummed and hawed about it, and I was a bit oh, but what about my career? What about my career? And I just thought, well, I'll get to India and I'll find a job doing something there, like a retail. And this might have been that I could have gone to a smaller brand to to get that retail director kind of role. Anyway, it's got a very long story short. India was amazing, best decision ever. But it wasn't not helpful for my career because I learned very great other skills. So in India, getting a job was a real challenge. I got offered the head of retail for Crocs, and they wanted me to work 6 days a week, which was quite normal in India because I'd be on a local contract, whereas my husband was on an expat contract. And they wanted to offer me £16,000. I was No, no. I like having sort of been in London doing that type of job. So I decided that I wouldn't do that. And I ended up actually building a community. It was not for profit or anything. It was called the Gagarin Connection. And where we lived, there was hundreds of expats moving there all the time. But they were all in this position of like, don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. Where do I go and find this? Where do I eat that's like safe, or where's not really expensive, or whatever it was, or where do I travel to, where's the best places to visit. So me and an American friend set up and grew this community of expats who'd moved there. So it went from 5 people, like where we first started, having a coffee, just sort of sharing what was like the challenges of being there. And we then started to like launch different social events. But at this time, social media wasn't a big thing. This is showing my age. So social media wasn't big. This was a lot of word of mouth, a bit on Facebook. Facebook was kind of there and we were starting to grow, but we didn't have Facebook groups or anything like that. It was just like, we're doing this, meet us here if you live in this area. And anyway, it grew in 2 years to like 2,000 people. We were organising like social events, and then we started to work. So this is where I was really starting to get into kind of understanding or doing more practical marketing things. That then happened, came back from India. And this is where really I got into marketing. So I decided I'd had a child and I was trying to balance looking after him and everything. And we moved actually to the very sleepy Cotswolds. I saw all these small, amazing businesses. And like, I'd say I'm kind of more from London, so I kind of missed a bit of the city buzz. But there were lots of people that had decided London wasn't for them, and they'd moved and set up like beautiful venues, restaurants. And so it was amazing food, but they weren't necessarily marketing it very well. So, but the thing at this point was I knew that I didn't have loads of digital experience, because when I was at university, digital wasn't a thing. It makes me sound like a dinosaur. So I decided to take a course. So I did what they call Digital Mums, which was all about empowering mums into marketing and like not wasting their skills, which is what I'm all about. And so I did this digital marketing course where you did a live campaign. So I launched what I called the Cotswold Connection, which is all about connecting people, venues, and making them shine. So I cheekily would put posts about amazing venues that I basically wanted to work with and get the traction on them, because this account was growing really fast, and be like, look, I can do this for you. What about if I became your social media manager? So that's how I sort of started to get into more of the marketing and realised there was an appetite for it. So that was my first business. But the mistake I kind of made at that stage was I was new and not necessarily confident to charge loads of money. So it definitely was more of a hobby business. Like that's how it ended up being, because I was working a lot of hours. Everything was still taking me longer because I was relatively new to it. And it was just a learning curve. You then get all the different clients you're working with. Some are very particular and we're like making lots of changes that I hadn't anticipated in my hourly fees and da-da-da. So fast forward that, my husband gets another overseas opportunity. And by this point, I've now got 2 children. And we were like, we always wanted our kids to live a stint abroad before like secondary school and things. So we were like, I was reluctant. It wasn't like an easy decision, but I was like, okay, let's go. So we moved to Chicago. Chicago, like amazing city, but it's the city of super confident, everyone's a president, a vice president, they've done all this and they came across really confident. I sort of got there and started saying, but I'd almost be a bit like, yeah, I run a marketing agency or I run a marketing business, but I'd sort of say it quite shyly and reluctantly, which is not my nature necessarily. But I was a bit like, but I don't have like all these things. And everyone was very confident at flashing off all their qualifications and titles. So it took me a bit of time. It took me probably a year, and I was like telling some more, like, building a friendship circle, etc. And this one friend said, Anna, like, what are you doing? You're totally wasted. Like, because I wasn't really working, and I was totally bored. Basically, that's when, in the middle of the pandemic, my friend said, right, that's enough. Like, so she became my mentor, and she pushed me out of my comfort zone to say, we're launching it. But basically, that's where I then started Your Agency. And since then, obviously come back here now. I live in Manchester, and I've grown a community there, and it's evolved. It's definitely started more in social media management, but I've then since gone on to do brand extensions, brand refreshes, and now I have a team. Well, they kind of range from being here in the Cotswolds still, where I've got old contacts, branding contacts that I work a lot. My team are there. And then over at Singapore, I've got someone that I used to work with that she does a lot of copywriting. So we've now got a small team, and we are all about helping female founders get visible.
What a story.
Hand breath. Yeah, it seems like I've got a lot to tell because I'm too old.
No, but I think it's so amazing. And I want to touch on the fact that you moved your whole life, twice, two times, to India and then to Chicago. How did that feel? I think so many people are reluctant to do that. Like, if they've got a career or they're doing something, they're so reluctant to take that leap. Like what was that like final thing that made you say, okay, we will move and do it?
So I think it was quite different each time. The first time was a bit like, we just got married. We didn't have any commitments. I'm like a huge fan of traveling. I traveled like after I was at uni, I did like 3 months ago. So I was like, why don't we give it a try? It was a bit like, I think my husband, so he was so nervous to even ask me because they actually asked us on the day we returned from our honeymoon. So he's like, let's go for dinner. And I was like, no, we've been away for 2 weeks. We've eaten so much. No. Anyway, and he goes, I needed to ask you in a public place. But actually I was like, what, there was like, my family were here or both our families were here. And but then I was like, there was what we learned in those 2 years. I mean, we changed I'll openly admit we changed as people because you see things you've never seen before. You've experienced different cultures. I mean, India particularly is the land of entrepreneurs. Like they will make something out of nothing. And that taught me a lot. Like you don't have to have a lot to grow a business. Like they're the best at showing you that. I got to see people who were literally supplying, like I'd go to this like old Indian market. It would be like a tiny hole in the wall basically. And this would be the supplier for like Gucci for perfume. It was just like, whoa. So I think that decision wasn't, when it came to the second, when it was like Chicago, I felt more established. I had 2 kids and I was like having that whole like, what's going to happen with the kids? And my business was like, even though it wasn't where I needed it to be, but it was starting to get more traction. And I was like, had found my feet in where my sort of niche was. But then after a lot of like talking about it, we were like, but if we don't do it now, and my son was 6 when we moved, my daughter was 3. And I was like, if we don't do it now, we'll never do it because then we'll be close to secondary school. And we always said for secondary school, we wanted to be, we'd staying in one place. So now we're in South Manchester. That's it. Not moving again. So a lot of people think it's a mad thing to do, but what you pick up in life skills, even if you think, I'm pausing my career, I think just that, there's no way I could do the job I do now without what I learned from going and, like you say, setting up a life and having to make friends. You just have to start by saying yes to everything and then sieving through what you want to do, and then you make the best life. And, we traveled, we saw so much of the world that we never would have seen if we hadn't been there.
Yeah. And I think when you have got a career or you've started in a career, so many people are reluctant to do that because it is a big deal.
Yes.
And, it's something that a lot of people think about and they kind of think, what am I going to do over there? I've spoken to so many people in our girls marketing community that have thought, they really want to move to like Australia or something like that. And they're kind of reluctant to do so because they're thinking, I don't know if like there will be a life for me there.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that you were almost like, cross that bridge when we come to it. We'll move and I'll find a job when I'm there.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we can get so caught up in, I need to find a job before I go.
Yeah.
But often it's just like, just go, see what happens.
Yeah.
And, there are a lot of consequences to doing that. But I think ultimately, if it's something that you want to do, and as you say, if you're young or if you feel like you can do it, that you've got no commitments.
And I think it's that research at the beginning is like, doing it when you're going abroad, like just seeking out some communities. There's so much online now that you can find where you can be like, I was already like seeing where, connecting with people through businesses that like even my husband's business, they were like, you should speak to this person. They've moved from here. So it was like, just think of who you might know. It's like tapping into that network. They might not live there, but someone, you start talking about, I'm thinking of doing this. Then someone says, well, I know someone who did that. And then they're like, do you want me to connect you? Yeah, great. And so I think you just have to sort of think outside the box a bit, but like, who could I connect with? Who could I speak to that might have done it, been there? And there are lots of online communities. And I think as long as you're like, you've got it in that you think, I want to give it a go, you can't go into it. Like there were people in India that would last like 2 weeks because they turned up going, I don't really, but they, for whatever reason, thought, I've got to do this for my career. It doesn't work. So you have got to have a real gut feeling and then you'll make it work. It's like, you've got to make the best of the situation, isn't it, really?
Yeah. no, definitely. So you're now the founder and CEO of your agency.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what your typical like day looks like.
Sure. So I guess no day is really the same. It's quite varied, but I'm always working with different female founders, and they are all quite similar in terms of they're all highly ambitious. They've often done their marketing like in-house themselves, and it's like they're going to that next level of their business. I do work with startups as well, but often it's that kind of next phase that they're looking to. I'll spend quite a lot of time on Zoom because I still have quite a big client base in the US, like where obviously I set it up. So that can be like evening calls as well a bit, but we've worked out a bit of a system now. So I kind of tend to do it 8 a.m. their time, so 6 hours time difference. So it kind of works. For me, I have to be around people. So I've got my team, so we'll do like team calls with like Tash and her team down in the Cotswolds where we're working on relaunches and branding and creative projects. But I'll also get out there, like networking. I do weekly co-working, and they've like been my sort of saving grace. I've never lived in South Manchester, so I was kind of reinventing myself yet again in a new area because I didn't know anybody there. So yeah, the co-working's been really good. Lots of Zoom calls, and then like campaign planning. So I spend a lot of time on like things like Canva, Planoly, sort of Asana, things like that, like all these different tools, just planning out, and then, working with them collaboratively with these female founders that I'm working with.
Do you enjoy like that every day? Because it's so different every day. Like,
yes.
Is that something that you love?
Yeah, I love the variety. I really love the variety. I think, and I think it's, again, being that sort of open-minded, like being quite new to the area, like I'm picking up different, and it's kind of like taking the questions that people are asking me to think, how could my offer change to suit them? So like one of my most recent things was a client was like, actually, I'd prefer to do that in person. Could we do it in person? I'm like, yeah, and then I've talked about more people, and suddenly I've got this like one day kind of strategy experience for people, and they're like really liking it. We do it in a nice venue. So it's just, I think for me, doing more in person is what brings out the best in me, but that's different for everybody. Some people are better just to be head down. So I kind of need to mix it up with a bit of, networking to meet new people, but also in person with clients. So it's not always on Zoom or on the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was the aim always to have your own agency? Or I don't know, I feel like you've had such a varied career so far. Was it kind of like, right, this is my end goal? Or was it not as easy as that?
I don't think it was like always. I thought I wanted to be my own boss for sure. Like I thought that's quite important to me because I wanted the flexibility around my children. I wanted to be able to go to pick up and things like that. So that was a big part of that. And I met lots of like-minded, a lot of the female founders that I work with are also mums. So they're trying to juggle that balance, and they need someone that understands that like things come up, suddenly last minute call, oh, my child's sick, or, that's fine. I get it. That's mum life. So I think I wanted to do that. And the agency part of it is, I wouldn't say is more about being around other creatives because that brings the best out of me. So, having those other experts has made me be able to like really level up. So I've gone from being that solopreneur when I started as the Cotswold Connection to now your agency where I've got these experts that I'm like, I 110% trust them. And I'm like, if you work with them, I know I can hand them over, well, not literally hand them over, but like give them an element of a project that we're working on to be like, right, I'll leave you to do that, or I'm involved in it. It depends what project it is. But, and I know that they're going to have like the best experience. And so I think, did I sit down and go, oh, I'm going to one day own an agency? Probably not. But I knew that I could give my clients more by working and surrounding myself with other creatives, because then more of the ideas. And I found it too lonely on my own. The only thing I miss about working in corporate is teams, like being in the part of a team, seeing them every day. So that's kind of the agency part for me, is creating that team so that I can be like, quite often I'll just leave a voice note for them to go, what do you think about this? So we're not physically in the same place very often, but we'll be like, what do you think about this? Or this person's contacted me about this. Like, do you think this would work? And, just having those sounding boards is so important.
Yeah, I think a lot of marketing is collaboration.
Yes,
and
completely.
Working on your own, sometimes you don't have that collaboration.
Yeah.
So I think having like more of an agency style or working in a team is nice because you do have a lot more collaboration, don't you?
Definitely.
I think what I want to talk about is, obviously, you did refer to yourself as a dinosaur before, which I have to say, you are not a dinosaur. Let's just clarify.
When I say like your target audience, I was like, oh, I'm quite a bit older than them. And I say there was no digital marketing university. I was like, well, it wasn't actually that long ago, was it?
No. Well, this is what I wanted to talk about. Do you think that there's like challenges for people maybe now that you didn't have when you started in marketing? Like you obviously talked about the fact that you didn't really know much about digital when you started. Are there challenges more now? Because there's like social media now, like all of that.
I think it's the challenge is like the noise. So like, how do you stand out? So if you're wanting to progress, how do you get noticed? And I think, before, gone are the days where you hand in what is like an impressive CV or something, because people will be like, yeah, great. And like, it's like thinking outside the box. And even this week I was at an event in Manchester, like a marketing event. And one of the founders, she was telling the story of her number one goal for her bag brand was to be stocked in Selfridges. And although, and she tried all the normal ways, she'd worked and spent a lot of money on PR. She'd been in all the glossy mags and everything. And she was like, but they just wouldn't take the bait of like the traditional. So she decided that storytelling was the way she was going to grab their attention. So she literally created a box of Kodak photos that told the story of her brand and how it had grown from the first wicker basket that she created from her heritage, like in China, and brought it all back. And literally within 10 minutes, or like not quite, but like a day of that box being received by the head of buying, she was having a meeting with them. So I think the challenge is more, how do you get noticed? Because there's so many different talents out there that, it's doing something different and it's thinking differently to get noticed, because there's just so much noise and so many different ways. I mean, it's like one of those things. It's almost never been easier to contact someone at a company, because you can find them through all these different social platforms and LinkedIn or whatever it is. But actually getting their attention is the challenge, I think.
Yeah, and that is true, because there's so many people that say, oh, just reach out to someone on LinkedIn. Yeah. I would definitely advise that, but it's almost like, how do you make that message different from, from another one? And how do you make sure that you do stand out? Because the job market is quite crowded, and a lot of it is about standing out from the crowd, as you say, and doing something a little bit different. Yeah. And I love that example of kind of sending something physical. I know creative CVs are big at the moment. What are your kind of thoughts on creative CVs?
I don't know. I haven't actually really had to see them, because of like the people I work with. I don't really see CVs anymore. Like particularly, like I kind of have a meeting with someone and it's more always in person if they're going to be someone that I work with. So it's like, I haven't seen a good or a bad example of that, to be honest, to be able to have an opinion.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say you don't see CVs though, because I think we are kind of moving away from that a little bit. Yeah. I seen an app, I can't remember the name of it now, but it basically is like a new way for people to apply for jobs.
Oh, okay.
And it's like TikTok style content. Okay. So you like submit a video and that sort of thing. And I think that's so interesting, because is that the way the job market's going? If CVs aren't a big thing anymore, maybe that is the way.
I know, and it's funny how like through your career, like, when you're like at school, like your A-levels are such a big deal and you're like, oh, this is going to shape my whole career. I'm not saying don't obviously get a good education, but actually I do think, it depends on the type of job you're going for. Obviously, for certain jobs, you have to have the certain degrees and everything. But for some of these jobs, actually just being ballsy and showing up. And I always think of Grace Andrews, who's the head of marketing for Diary of a CEO. And she shared, when we were at the event that we first met at, that Connective 3 Connective 3? Yeah. The event there, she did her talk and she was talking about how she applied. And it was literally an email saying, I think you might like me because I like 1, 2, and 3. And it was just like, it was an email and she got the job with Stephen Barlow. It shows that you don't have to sit there and write like chapter and verse about what you've done. And I think video is another really great one. But actually think about it as, what is my experience? But life experience often can be as powerful as work experience as well. So making sure you're bringing in some of that, to what you're doing. Because I think some of my clients even, ultimately you're pitching to them, it's similar to sort of to applying for a job. And it's when you start saying, well, I've worked with this, I've connected these people, all bringing those experiences in are going to be far more powerful than me saying, well, I got a 2-1 here. It's like, is that really relevant now? No, not so much.
It's interesting though, because a lot of thing is placed on getting an education and having
and a
degree and that sort of thing. But I speak to so many people who work in marketing that never studied marketing.
Yeah.
But I actually never heard of marketing until I went to university. I didn't do marketing, I did psychology.
Yeah.
But I heard of it through my partner, who was actually working at an agency as a developer, a web developer. And I was blogging. I'd been blogging for years. I absolutely loved it. And I was blogging just because it was fun. I was getting paid for it. And my partner sat down and said to me, I've told this story on the podcast before, so I won't carry on too long. I sat down and he was like, you can actually make money from blogging. And I was kind of like, what does that even mean? I knew obviously journalism was a thing. I understood, that people write books and, write for magazines and all stuff like that. But I wasn't really interested in that. And he was like, no, you can do copywriting, you can write blogs for businesses, for websites and stuff like that. And that kind of opened a whole new world to me, because I'd never actually heard of marketing before, because it's not taught at school or anything.
No, I mean, I did business A-level. And what I liked about it was I thought that I was getting more practical advice for life, which is what appealed to me. It wasn't a traditional, I did I did history, so that was very traditional. And then I did that. And I was like, at least this is useful for and actually my son the other day said to me, oh, I don't like studying this. He has to do classics at school or Latin or something one time. And I was like, well, you just got to do it. But then I was also thinking, when he goes, but when am I ever going to use this in my life? And I was like, well, if you became a doctor, if you chose, he's like, I don't want to be a doctor. I was like, okay. So there are, I think at least now, when you're at school or you choose at college or whatever, there are options to do more of these sort of things. But yeah, when it wasn't a big thing, business and economics were kind of the big things, but what that exactly entailed, I wouldn't have necessarily known. But then when I started looking at the options, there were some really great options. And that's when I started I only majored in marketing when I got there, because I was like, that appeals to me, when I was just looking through what the optional ones were. And I was like, oh, that one. And then suddenly I was like, oh, they're all sort of marketing. But a lot of the marketing you're taught at university is theory. Mm-hmm. It's not actually practical, look at this theory on this from this person from 100 years ago or whatever, So yeah, it's interesting to see, but yeah.
I think that's a lot of the stuff that we do with Girls in Marketing, and we have our Girls in Marketing membership. Yeah. We really focus on the fact that even if you do have an education, whether it's marketing degree or not, it is very theory based. And I think something a lot of people lack is that practical experience and that practical knowledge to be able to go in to a job and say, actually, I can do a strategy. People can put together a SWOT analysis or, a situational analysis, but they can't actually then go away and say, this is how you get buy-in from stakeholders. This is how you do all of these things. Yeah. And I think that's kind of where the gap is.
Exactly. It's life skills. And I think slowly there's more options. I remember doing, what is it called? Not Enterprise Nation. At school, Young Enterprise it's called, and you had to create your own business and market it, and it was a competition that we did, and you'd sort of do little pitches for it, and that was quite fun because it was more practical. But there's I don't see it that having got a 12-year-old now, still young, but there's not those sort of practical, other than I think they do focus more on how you speak and present yourself, which is obviously very useful in life today, because you're much more sort of visual. Everything's more visual, and you're going to have to get on video some point in your life, really, aren't you, now? But yeah.
So talking about marketing then, you kind of say don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yes.
What does that mean? Because I feel it's leaning towards, is it about, okay, should I just focus on one area of marketing? Mm-hmm. Do you mean don't put all of your eggs in that basket from your perspective, a career perspective?
It's probably not as much a career perspective, but I think when I say that, I talk about probably more from a where I work with female founders is what tends to happen is they might put, a lot of them would focus on social media, for example. They're like, as a business owner, they're having to juggle finance, all these different roles. And they'll think, right, I've got a very limited amount of time. I'm going to focus on that. And I'm like, but ultimately you don't own the data. It's risky. You don't know what's going to happen to these social platforms. What if you get hacked? All that sort of thing. So my sort of theory on all your eggs in one basket is don't spread yourself too thin. Definitely not. And there is an argument for niching, particularly in your career. So I think for career, it's probably not as relevant. But I think, don't put all your eggs in one basket too early is probably from a career point of view, I'd say, because you might find something that you don't even know about yet in marketing is what you actually love. So just give things a try. And if there's a project or like something where you could dabble in something else or, just do a course out of interest because you want to find out about it, that could be your calling in life. But if you sort of come out and think, right, when you start your career, I'm only going to do this, you're kind of limiting your opportunities. And like some of the stuff that I work in now, did I start doing that? No. Am I a complete expert in it? Absolutely not. But I still now am able to offer that whole spectrum. And that's what I really talk to a lot of female founders about is like the importance of email marketing. Don't do only, digital, don't do only social. And like, so that's kind of what I mean from my sort of eggs in the basket point of view. But also don't, the flip side of that is don't spread yourself too thin. So it's kind of that from a career point of view. Yeah, I think you have to be known for something, but also don't disregard something because that could be the best thing and you could, and also don't be afraid to change. If you decide something and then you think, I started doing pure social media management and that it actually is not what I want to do. I'm much more strategic and bigger visionary stuff. So I do much more strategy work now and planning and campaign planning and things like that. And that's what I enjoy most. So it's, don't be sort of ring fenced into one area. It's kind of the message.
I speak to a lot of like one person marketing teams who say, I really want to do an email strategy, or I really want to do a social strategy or an SEO strategy. And I kind of say to them, right, okay, that's great, but you are only one person. Yeah. And as you said, you don't want to spread yourself too thin. No. And I think when it comes to marketing strategy, we can get so caught up in how do I create the best strategy possible?
Yeah.
How do I get all these amazing results and all of that? But you are just one person. Yeah. And I think
it's got to be realistic, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And something that I always say to people is, okay, you want to do that. And I admire the ambition, but let's take it down a little bit. Think about
basics,
exactly. Think about the realistic situation where you are now.
Yeah.
How do you get to where you want to be without spreading yourself too thin? And I think that's so important.
Definitely. And I think, I think for me, like when I'm working with people, we do look at all of that, but we don't go down like, I don't know, the SEO is relevant to the keywords. So the keywords are so vital. So it then all it interlinks. You don't need to be as a business owner, you do, like you're saying, solopreneur, you don't need to be like this top end expert on SEO. And ultimately, if you're not an expert, outsource. Like, don't try and kill yourself trying to do it because like SEO, I understand it because I have to understand it, but actually doing the work, I always go to somebody else because that's not my strength. And someone's going to get better by working with Kira, who I work with, or whoever, or Danny. So it's like making sure like you surround yourself with other experts and go and ask. And I think that's really important to get those answers.
What would you say is like the biggest lesson that you've learned from your career so far?
Okay, this is really hard to answer with one. Can I give two?
Yeah, go on.
The first one is surround yourself with like-minded, amazing people because nobody can do it on their own. Getting a community of creatives to collaborate with, to have experts to tap in, or if that's a mentor, when I started your agency, I had Gillian as my mentor, and that totally changed how I set up my business. And that doesn't have to always be some highly expensive mentor. There's so many amazing mentor schemes for people doing all kinds of jobs. And then the other one that's a biggie for me is never be afraid to ask for something. Like, go out there and ask, even if you're like absolutely bricking it as you ask it and think they're never going to say yes. What is the worst that can happen? They say no. Well, but if you don't want to go away thinking, but I never had the balls to ask. So I think going out there, and some things, I don't know, like that people have done, and you think, who would have thought that brand would have worked with that? That's probably because they just thought, sod it, what have I got to lose? I'm going to ask. And they did, and they opened up a massive opportunity. So yeah, when you approach some of these people, whether it's for like your next job or whether it's for like pitching because you want to work with a different brand or anything like that, you don't have to have this perfect plan. You just have to believe in yourself and believe that you can help them and you could do that next big job. And then if you go out there and just say, and they might even open up a slightly different opportunity that you didn't even know that was there, that's going to take you on the route to the other job. So I think just go out there and ask, and don't be afraid to ask, because you really are limiting your opportunities if you don't put yourself out there.
Yeah. I think I want to talk about confidence and kind of confidence in the workplace, because I know this is something that you are quite passionate about.
Yeah.
Obviously, from having your role at Marks & Spencer's, like really kind of soaring your career there, you've got to have confidence there. Is it something that's kind of come naturally to you, or would you say you've worked on it? Because I think so many people are, I would say I'm relatively a confident person, but I think there's so many things that you're kind of unsure about which make you feel less confident. So how would you say you rate your kind of natural confidence? Is it something you've worked on over time?
I mean, I do think confidence comes with experience, like definitely. I mean, am I always confident? Of course I'm not. But I wouldn't be where I was if I wasn't pushing myself out of my comfort zone in certain situations. When I going back into like working in a business for M&S, for example, I was a very new grad who managed to get into a flagship store, which was quite unusual. But I basically had the head of women's wear come visit me, and I decided she was my kind of woman. I knew that she was really ambitious. She was going places. I just literally went up to her and I said, I want to be in London. And if you ever have a job that you think I'd be good at doing, I just walked around and shown her what I'd achieved there. And she was like, okay. So when she then got promoted to be the store director of Marble Arch, she rang me and she said, Anna, I've got a job. So, it's like, I hate that phrase, fake it till you make it. But like, there is a bit of like, you've just got to go there. But again, it comes back to that bit that we just talked about before, is if you believe you've got the right idea, the only way you're going to get people to listen to it is if you're assertive. It's not something that comes as naturally always to women. I mean, that's very generalist comment, but I do think that guys would be like, oh, I'm just going to blag it. Whereas women are a bit like, oh, but what if? And there's all that sort of procrastination about it. It's definitely something over time that I've built. If you've got a great line manager, you're probably getting that more regular feedback that will start to build your confidence. But not all businesses are good at doing that anyway. So it's just trying to, it sounds like silly, but take a step back and look and think, what have I achieved? Where was I 6 months ago? Where am I now? Oh, actually, because if you don't take that step out, you're working in your role or in your business and not on it. And if you don't have that working on your business time, you don't build the confidence because you can't see, because you're just so in it. You just think that's now normal. The new norm is the norm. And that wasn't 3 months ago or 6 months ago. And you think, oh yeah, I did actually, I launched that brand, or I did this, or I did that, or I did this campaign. And then you're like, yeah.
I think self-reflection is so critical within a career. And it's something that probably doesn't come naturally to many people. And I think when you compare kind of your marketing career to a marketing strategy, as an example, with a marketing strategy, we always say it's about results, it's about analytics, it's about insights, it's about reflecting, it's about all of these things. But we don't tend to do that for career. And I think something that is so key and something that's really changed the way I look at my own success and my own career is reflecting and also treating your career like a strategy. Like, if you do have that end goal, saying, okay, well, how am I going to get to that goal? What goals, what smaller goals can I make to get to that goal? And if you don't have that end goal, which so many people don't have an end goal, so don't worry if you don't. The smaller things. And always, a very good friend of mine, Gabby Mendez, she runs another podcast called Talk 20s. She said something years ago now when I very first met her, and it's something that stuck with me, and it's something that I I will be honest and say I don't really do as much as I should, but I'm going to advocate for it anyway.
Yeah, I know. I'm all about that. Like advocate. I will do everything, lots of things with my clients. I'm like, oh yeah, I should really do that myself. But yeah.
So it's to create a big page of small wins. So what she did was she said, and this was during the pandemic. So it was very much like she just started a business. She just left a full-time job. She was going in on her business. And she said she created this big page of small wins. And it was all about the small things that she achieved. Yeah. Because as you said, you forget about these things.
You do. It's so easy because you're just working and you're on that sort of like, for want of a better word, treadmill. You just, and you're always like, if you are ambitious, which is like what a lot of the people that, listening to your podcast or like that I'm working with in the like founders, it's almost like, oh, but I haven't done this. They're always more likely to say, oh, but this was the bit that didn't go well. I'm like, yeah, but you did this, this and this, and you've just rebranded and you've just done this. And they're like, oh yeah. But you sometimes need that other person. And that's where mentors can be really helpful because they kind of almost force you like to do some of that, which, I'm not saying you have to have another person, but I think it helps sometimes.
I think having some sort of place.
Or just a friend.
Exactly. Some sort of place that you can note down, you can reflect, or someone you can talk to, whether it's a friend or whatnot. We have a lot of people in our girls marketing community that, meet up outside of what we do because it's so nice to have someone that understands. That's one of the reasons that I set up girls marketing was because I felt like I didn't have, a friend or a group of people that were in a similar position to me that really loved marketing but wanted to speak to someone outside of their colleagues or outside of their team and someone who understands, because you can have friends outside of work and that's amazing, but I think there's this new kind of like revolution that's happening now around like workplace friendships and professional friendships, and I think it's so important in marketing because it's such a difficult industry. There's so many things going on, so many trends, algorithms, strategies. It's how do you stand out, but equally, how do you deal with that? Because it's a lot.
Yeah. And I don't know if in your community, because I've been in other communities where they've done like weekly wins and people just put them down, which is almost like forcing that to happen, that self-reflection. And I think that is always quite a nice thing because you're suddenly saying something out loud and you're a bit like, or you're writing it in a community, whatever that channel you're on. And I think that helps you a bit as well.
If someone's struggling right now to advocate for themselves in the workplace, so to have that confidence, to feel like they go in places, what would you recommend?
I would say it is a bit about the reflection to like look back and think, where were you, what your big achievements are so that you can, have those in your back pocket for when you need them. So when you're having that conversation with someone that's maybe... It's also thinking like strategically, who do you need to like get in front of to be able to help that progress? So that doing that reflection, having a think of like, what have I done well? What have I not done like so well? What could I improve? And keeping that going, because no one else can do that better than yourself, even though it's a really hard thing to force. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, and I'm not saying I do it enough but I think do that and then find those people that there's always somebody who has your corner, but it's just, or has your back almost and is like championing you, and it's not always obvious, but if you have that in the back of your mind, suddenly, like in my work, suddenly I was like, this person they were like, oh, I was referred to you by this person. And I was like, oh, and then I was like, and that's how it ended up that we worked together because we knew that our skills like were, complementary to each other, and then we could offer a better service by doing that together. So it was then works like that. So I think it's that self-reflection, thinking what you're doing, and then just thinking, who could I talk to, that confidant, that mentor that you could then just be like, this is how I'm feeling, this is where I want to go. A mentor's all about that person that's got that little bit more experience and's probably been in the same position that you are at that point, and so therefore and it might not be that you take the same route, but they might say, well, this actually worked really well for me. So then you can start exploring different ways you might get to where you want to be. But again, it's that assertiveness. It's hard, but the only way you're going to be noticed is to be quite vocal and assertive.
I also want to talk a little bit about community, because obviously you've lived in various different places. Now, you're living in Manchester, you're building that community. Community is a massive buzzword in marketing, but equally, I think networking is something that's really important for career. Yeah. You've obviously had to do that in multiple different countries, multiple different cities. Yeah. Would you say that's something that comes naturally to you? Because I feel like a lot of people are like scared of networking because it's quite a big thing.
Yeah. Well, I think people often think traditionally of marketing, you're going to have to stand up and do your elevator pitch, or you're going to have this speed dating thing. And now there's it's a bit like how marketing's evolved. There's so many more creative, more laid back, fun ways of marketing. So it might be that you go and it's like, I don't know, a style event. So it's something you're interested in, but you're then meeting people that you then start having a conversation with them, and then it could lead to that. So I think it's trying to think, it's not about that traditional stuffy, I'm not going to name any groups that I kind of associate with that, but there is that sort of traditional marketing, but there's so many brilliant things I've got a couple that have been really sort of lifesavers for me coming to Manchester. So there's Femfluence, who they do different events based on different pillars in your life. So they do style events, wellness events, business events. And so then you can pick and choose which bit you want to do. And then, you can meet different people, and you might go to one and think, I didn't really meet anyone, but then you might go to another and meet 5 people, and you've got to keep going at it. It's not something that you can go once and it's going to be a win and you move on. It's not like that. It's about that whole community building, going back. And then another one is called With Passion and Purpose, where they help you basically have photos done as well as do some of that. So you're building your own photos for your marketing when you're a solopreneur or a small business owner, but then you're having like-minded conversations with a coffee around, and it's just really casual. So I think don't be afraid of marketing, because I've made brilliant friends from going to networking events, and you just hit it off straight away. It's only like going out and meeting someone. I think you've got to treat it more like that rather than think you're there with an agenda. I think go there just to be really open-minded of it just being a social event rather than a networking event.
Yeah, I think there's quite negative connotations when it comes to networking. And that's something so we do some events with Girls Marketing. It's not a main thing that we do, but we do them.
Yeah.
And something that I am so conscious of is saying anything about networking, because I almost kind of feel like it puts people off, because it definitely puts me off, because I typically, before setting up Girls Marketing, will go to these champagne flutes, black tie events. That was networking, but very, very corporate. And I think it's not really a space that I want to be in. No, and it's also, they're not probably the people that I want to network with either. Yeah. So I think it's, as you say, it's about finding where your people are, what they're doing, and showing up to those types of events. Yeah. People sometimes say, I'm really nervous to come to a Girls Marketing event by myself. But we always say to them, honestly, it is so chill. Everyone's so lovely. And it's just nice to go to those sorts of events, because for so long, networking's just been about what can I get out of this, or what can I get out of this. If you go in like that, you're probably going to be disappointed, I think. I think you just go in thinking it's just like going to a social event. And, the first I've had a client who really was really, really nervous. And I just said, well, the first one, why don't we go together? Not to then hang out the whole time together, but at least the walking in bit. And so take someone with you for that first time, just to build your confidence. And then normally if you go back if you like one and you go back, there's someone that there. So then it's okay, that's straight away is a bit of a okay, I know someone, this is okay. And I can go and have a conversation with them first. But yeah. So I've definitely gone to extremely awkward ones, but I've I think it's just trial and error to find ones that you enjoy and where your people are hanging out. And you honestly don't always know until you've tried it. Yeah. But I think certain ones, the way they, when they start talking and you see the behind the scenes, do a bit of research. And then I've had a couple, I've done a lot in the last year because I've been so new to the area. And there's definitely some I'm never again, tick. But there's others that are really supportive and found good. It's nice to know that those sorts of events, exist, because I think that kind of industry has been so corporate for so long that those events existing is so, I think, essential, really, especially it's a new take on networking. Yeah. I truly believe that.
And I think as well with the culture of a lot of people working from home, I think co-working, and I don't necessarily, there's this place, I'm a big believer in co-working spaces and things like that, but there's also people that are setting up co-working groups. So it's just literally, you go there, work, you could just, if you really wanted to, put your head down and not really talk to someone, but you're around other people. But by nature of that, you're kind of like, oh, hi, put your laptop up, everyone starts talking, and that's, at least then you're doing some work, but it's not as pressurized as like you're just turning up to network. So I think co-working is quite a good maybe balance potentially to meet people as well.
Yeah.
As long as you're not working on some like highly big project that you need to really focus on, because it tends to be a bit too much chat, but it's good.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I would love to just finish. I want people to go away with like one, there's been tons of things we talked about that I'm sure people will go away with, but what one tip would you give to people who are listening about progressing in their career right now? Like, what would you say to those people if they could do one thing or take one thing away? I
think it is about not being afraid to ask and put yourself out there, because your best advocate is kind of yourself, and actually not being afraid to ask, and rejection doesn't mean you failed. It's just a learning, and it means another is an opportunity to go out and do it again. And I think you just never know. If you ask someone that if that's your dream to work with that person, you'll have thought about it for long and hard. So you'll probably have all the answers that they're going to ever ask you if, you can open that conversation with them, and you just never know what door that might open. So I'd say just put yourself out there. At times it's going to be extremely uncomfortable, but unless you do that, you're not going to progress as much as if you want to progress and that's your goal. I think that would be my one thing. Well, that's such a lovely way to end the episode. Thanks so much for coming on. Thank you for having me. It's been really fab. Thanks. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Girls in Marketing podcast. It was a good one, wasn't it? If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review and rating of the podcast and share it with someone who may find it useful. Your support really does go a long way. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, but in the meantime, keep up to date with Girls in Marketing over on social media and our website. We'll pop some helpful links in the description.